sickle cell disease, and this disease is an inherited blood disorder which often creates crisis in the life of its sufferers. And some of the common symptoms include fatigue, dizziness, headaches, coldness in the hands and feet. About 300,000 children are born each year with the disease, and it is common in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. And so with the help of our guest this morning, Dr. Kenneth Enwerem, he's going to help me pronounce it properly, we'll be able to look at this. Dr. Kenneth is a public health physician who is currently pursuing further studies at the Royal Tropical Institute in Amsterdam. I'd like to say welcome, Dr. Kenneth.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. I would have said more about you, but I guess we can pick up some of those in the course of the interview. Would you be so kind to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them who you are?
Okay, like you said correctly, my name is Dr. Kenneth Enwerem, and you pronounced it correctly.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm a medical doctor by training. From Nigeria, and currently I'm pursuing a master's in public health degree in the Royal Tropical Institute in Amsterdam. I graduated from medical school in 2006, and since then I've been involved basically in non-profit charity.
Here or in Nigeria?
In Nigeria, yes.
Okay.
I started a sickle cell charity back home in Nigeria in 2011 to promote the awareness for sickle cell disease, advocate for sickle cell disease, and also provide some kind of care and succor for affected people and also for their families. Yeah, so and I've been doing that and also trying to create global awareness actually for sickle cell disease because it's neglected.
What gave you the passion to get involved in sickle cell?
Well, I was actually born with the disorder.
You were?
Yes, I was born with sickle cell disease, and in my final year medical school, I had a very, very serious crisis that almost took my life. After I survived that, I made a pact with God because I believed it was a miracle that I survived because people thought I had gone. So I made a pact with God that I was going to dedicate my life to helping out people that have sickle cell disease, creating awareness for the disease so that people know about it because it can be prevented. Okay. So that people can know about it and know what to do in order to prevent sickle cell disease. And for those that have the disease, to know what measures to put in place so that they can live a healthier life and have a longer life for themselves.
Thank you so very much for coming this morning. And I think we're going to look at this topic more than once because I guess we cannot cover all that we need to cover in this time segment. But just to start, tell us really about this. What is the sickle cell trait and the disease? Can you tell us the differences so we know?
The hemoglobin in the blood is the oxygen carrying component of the blood.
Yes.
And we know that every physical manifestation that we have as human beings is an expression from the genetic component of our bodies. Therefore, the genes that are responsible for making hemoglobin are categorized into different types. Basically, there are three main types of hemoglobin genotypes. We have those that are AA, we have those that are AS, and we have those that are SS.
Yes.
Those that are AA are said to have a normal hemoglobin genotype. Those that are AS are said to have the trait, or they are called sickle cell carriers. They are healthy, but they carry the sickle cell gene. It means they can pass it to their offspring, but they themselves not manifest the disease. Then those that are SS are now the homozygous form of the sickle cell disease, and they manifest the disease. In fact, sickle cell SS is actually the most severe form of sickle cell disorder. There are other variables like SC, S, beta thalassemia, and the rest of them, but sickle cell SS is the most severe form, which is actually called sickle cell anemia. while other variants now called sickle cell disease.
Okay.
So that is, in summary, what the difference between a trait and sickle cell disease itself.
Oh, awesome. No, so, how do people get it in the first place? How do people get the disease in the first place?
Okay,
or the
sickle cell
disorder?
disease is inherited from parents to child. Now, for a child to have sickle cell disease, he or she must inherit the sickle cell gene from both parents. It means both parents must be carriers of the sickle cell gene, and pass it to their offspring, for that offspring to develop sickle cell disease. So contrary to certain beliefs, it is not a diabolical thing. It is not a punishment from God, like some people believe. It is not contagious, like I cannot pass it to you by touching you or by giving you blood or something like that. No, it's not sexually transmitted. It's only from parent to offspring, and both parents must have the sickle cell gene in them to pass it to their child. So if a parent is AA, there's no way that parent can be able to give birth to a child with sickle cell, because he or she doesn't have the gene. So both parents must have the gene and pass it to the child for the child to have sickle cell disease.
So any child whose parents has the genes that has a chance of getting it.
Yes, has a chance of getting it. If both parents are carriers, which means both parents are AS, then there is a 1 in 4 chance that each child will get sickle cell disease.
Is it?
Now, I want to bring out a very, very important point here, because most people, when they hear a 1 in 4 chance, they think if you have 4 children, one of them will be SS.
Yeah.
No, but the chance thing is just a statistical way of expressing the probability that one can have sickle cell disease. For example, if a couple would have AS as their genotype, it is possible that they have 4 children and all of them can have sickle cell disease. It's also possible that all of their children can be AA, but the probability just states that there's a 25% chance that for each pregnancy, a child can come out with SS.
Yes.
But that is statistics. It means if there's in a large proportion, for example, if a couple can have up to 100 children, then there's a chance that about 25% of them will be SS. But not in a small number like maybe 4 children or 3 children. It's just like closing your eyes and picking up a ball from a basket that contains, let's say, balls of 3 different colors. You can pick the same color each time. It's just a chance.
It's a chance.
You know, and so that's a very, very important thing I would like to bring out.
So it's possible, but some people who have the genes, the genotype or the genes, whatever you call it,
genotype,
can still have children who are perfectly sickle cell.
Definitely.
Okay. Now, is there a way this can be prevented from happening?
Okay. Sickle cell disease can be prevented by premarital genetic counseling.
Yes.
And when couples want to have children, they go for genetic counseling, and they are counseled by the genetic counselor to tell them what chances they have to have kids with sickle cell disease. However, genetic counseling does not change abruptly the behavior of people.
Yeah.
Understand?
Yes.
And one thing I have noticed, and several studies have also shown, is that is not an appropriate time to actually do genetic counseling for
when they are getting ready to marry.
When they're getting ready to get married. There's a study that was done in Cyprus that showed that over 90% of couples who were carriers of the gene, who passed through genetic counseling, still went ahead to get married, even though they knew the risk of having sickle cell children. In another study in Nigeria, more than 50% of people that were interviewed said, irrespective of their hemoglobin genotypes, they were still going to go ahead and marry. So at that time, before people get married, they would have made the decision to get married. And it's very difficult at that time to kind of dislodge them from that decision just on the basis of their hemoglobin genotype, because there are several other issues that are considered before one gets married.
Absolutely.
So my proposition to this is give people information when they are still very young, before they even start thinking about relationships.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and that is why my organization back home is focused on educating young people in secondary schools and early part of their university, so that they can have the information about sickle cell even before they begin to have
relationship
issues of love in their mind, because love can make you take irrational decisions.
Yes.
So if you have this information before you even start thinking about love or relationships, then you can be armed to make an informed decision. But mind you, I'm not saying that people that are carriers should not get married.
Because they can get married.
Yes, they can get married, because bearing children is just one of the reasons why people get married. A whole lot of people get married just for companionship, just to have a partner. You know. So and then it now depends also on the geographical and cultural setting.
Yeah.
If you're talking to people in Europe where abortion is legal, people that are carriers of the gene can get married, do a prenatal diagnostic screening to discover if the child has sickle cell disease, and have termination of the pregnancy if the child has sickle cell disease. But for example, in Africa, where abortion is illegal, and in some part of Southeast Asia, I mean, termination of pregnancy is not an option. So in that context, it is now relevant for people to be able to make informed decisions, not to go into a relationship that can produce children that have sickle cell disease. But even at that, even if they choose to still go ahead, there are still measures that can be put in place to ensure that the children that have these diseases have healthier lives. There is issues of newborn screening that have been proven to be effective in the Western world, where children born with sickle cell disease and are identified in the early days of life can be put into a screening program, given prophylactic antibiotics, you know, that helps prevent infections that kill people that have sickle cell disease. And this has been shown to increase life expectancy of people that have sickle cell disease to as high as 40, 50 years in Western countries. You know, so there are various alternatives. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't get married. People should get married, but they should do it based on an informed decision. That is very, very critical.
Wow. I on this note, I really feel that, you know, like most of us who have come overseas, we are now residing in a country other than our own, and sometimes we meet new partners who are, you know, we do not know much about, but we get connected because of love, as you said, and we got married. We have not had a chance to really investigate some of these things. So it is important that maybe even the medical system should highlight some of these things as part of our medical record. We should know, a doctor should be able to tell me upfront, hey, this is your genotype, and so if you ever you get and you love somebody, you fall in love with somebody, you can have so consequences. You know, that's one of the things we should be protected. I recall a young man who was in my secondary school days, who I didn't know what this was, but this guy was always sick. He was so lame. He was always sick. And later on, we found out that he had this problem. And we couldn't bear to see him going through the problems he was going through, the health problems, you know. So it's good for people to know well ahead of time what they have and what their partner have, you know, so we don't let love blind us get together only to create more problems for ourselves. So I'm just making this, echoing this clearly to all of us out there. We're in a religious community more or less, so we want to make sure that we consider these things as well, our genotype, so that we don't only end sorrows when we have fallen in love and gotten married to people, I mean to strangers, so to speak. Okay, thank you so very much for that piece of information. But can you tell us, how does an individual know if he or she has a sickle cell trait? And how is the sickle cell trait, and how is this diagnosed?
Okay, the hemoglobin genotype is known just by very simple blood tests, which we call the hemoglobin genotype test. It's a very cheap test. Back home in Africa, it costs.
But does someone have to go request for that, or it should not be the most common thing that any doctor should do as part of a routine diagnosis or routine checkup or whatever?
Well, I will propose that back in countries where the prevalence of the disease is high.
Yeah.
However, it might not be a cost-effective thing to do in Europe, where it is a very, very rare disease. It is not seen among Europeans.
Why is it? Why is it not common?
Okay. Now let's look at the history of sickle cell. If you look at the regions in the world that are affected by sickle cell disorder, you will notice there is a similarity of those regions with areas that have malaria, that are endemic for malaria.
Okay.
Now, evolutionists believe that malaria was ravaging the lives of people in certain regions of the world: sub-Saharan Africa, the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, and the likes of them. And as a part of the body to kind of overcome this problem, and we know that malaria affects red blood cells, so there was a mutation in the genes that produce hemoglobin in the blood.
Yeah.
Now, it is believed that before now, the genotypes were only AA, basically. Now, there was a mutation, a slight change in the proteins that make up the hemoglobin, and there was a replacement of a protein at one of the chains that made the formation of hemoglobin S, and which is the sickle cell gene.
Yeah.
Now, people that are carriers of the sickle cell gene, and those that are AS, are more protected from severe malaria than those that have AA, which correlates this story. So, which is a good thing that the body did. However, when this S, which is an abnormal form of hemoglobin, combines with another S, it is now deleterious to the body.
Yes.
But in the form of AS, it has a protective effect for malaria, which is a good thing. So that's the story of how sickle cell came into being. It's just a mutation in the gene responsible for producing hemoglobin in order to protect the body from malaria, which was a good thing that the body did. However, in combination with itself, it produces sickle cell disease. So you can see that sickle cell disease is only common in areas that had malaria, which is sub-Saharan Africa, the Mediterranean region, Southeast Asia, and some parts of Latin America, but not in the Western world, not in Europe because they didn't have malaria, not in America because they didn't have malaria. Most of the people that have sickle cell disease in these regions are migrants. For example, in Europe, most of the people that have sickle cell disease are people that come from Africa, probably from Southeast Asia. Yes. The same thing in America. So you wouldn't really see a native European or a native American that has sickle cell disease, except that person can trace his origin back to these places that I've mentioned that have sickle cell disease.
Okay. Now, if you're listening to this program and you have a question for our doctor, you can please give us a call on the studio line 0207371619. Maybe you know somebody who is suffering from this. You want to ask and know how to deal with it, how to go about it. You're welcome to give us a call in the studio. And now back to the question I asked before: how does an individual know if he or she has a sickle cell trait, and how is that diagnosed? You began to speak. So you want to complete the answer?
Okay, like I said, the hemoglobin genotype is known via a simple blood test, which is the hemoglobin genotype test. Yeah. And it's a test that is done commonly in laboratories and in hospitals. You just give your blood sample and it's put through the process and it shows whether your genotype is AA or AS or SS or any of the other less common variants of hemoglobin genotype. And it's a very cheap test. Back home it costs less than €3. I don't know how much it is here in Europe. So it is a test that we recommend for young people back home to do. Here in Europe, it is a test that is also done in their newborn screening package, where people, newborns, their bloods are taken and the test is done. In some instances, it is restricted to ethnical groups that come from regions that have sickle cell disease. It's not really done for the whole populace, because not everyone has the disease, although that brings issues of inequality, discrimination, equity. So in some Western countries, it is a standard test that is done for every child that is born. So if one does a test and you discover that you're AS, then you're said to be a carrier of the sickle cell gene. And then if you have AA, you're said to have a normal hemoglobin genotype. If you're SS, you're said to be to have sickle cell.
So for, if let's say a native Dutch person, a native European, full-blooded, marries, let's say, somebody, a migrant from, let's say, Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeastern Asia, so there's a chance that the product of that union may be AS, for example. They have an exposure to sickle cells.
Exactly.
So maybe down the road, then the thing can happen, even though they may be living here.
Exactly. You see, that is one of the main reasons why I'm promoting global awareness for the disease, because the disease is neglected because people in the Western world do not suffer from the disease. However, like you rightly said, migration is beginning to cause the disease to come to Europe, and there's intercultural marriage. People from the West are marrying people from Africa, from Asia, and the gene is being introduced into Europe gradually. And like you said, down the line, you will see people that are natives of European countries giving birth to people that have sickle cell disease. So it is very, very critical that we nip it in the bud at this early stage. If nothing is done about it now, I'm telling you, a century down the line, sickle cell will become a major disorder that this world will have to contend with. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, not really a question. I think myself, I came from a medical home, and from childhood, all of us already know our genotype, all of us. And my parents made us very conscious to ask people about their genotype before we enter into any relationship. So we've already known that we are all AA because our parents are AA, and then there is no AS among us. And then they told us, well, if you enter into any relationship and the person have AS, you can still be in if you want. But try as much as you can to have somebody who is AA. That they told us. So from childhood already I knew that. So when I was of age, I already began to grow with that awareness to be sure that you don't go for maybe AS or SS, right?
Okay, well,
but not all the people are privileged to have that information. Like you doctor, you were saying that you are promoting awareness. I think every parent must go for this hemoglobin test, and then be able to know their genotype, and from there then take us with their children to go and do the same test. And then, I mean, even if we start now to begin to have that awareness from our family level, I think it's very, very important. Secondly, I also would like to know from you, because he has been trying to ask you some of the symptoms. We want to know, when you guys talk about being in crisis, honestly, I've witnessed in a hospital when a sickler is in crisis. What can you throw light to our audience to really know what goes on? Because you said you nearly lost your life. Was it that you were in crisis? And another question also I have is, when we were small, we had this notion that sicklers don't survive; they don't grow up to 23 years. But as I'm looking at you, I believe you are more than that. So what is the secret to your survival?
Thank you very much. These are very, very important questions. Very good questions, and let me take them one by one the same way you asked.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I like to comment on your first issue. You said your parents knew their genotypes, and then knew that for all the kids, which is a very, very good thing. And that they advised you to be very careful who you marry, whether you should be careful not to get involved with someone that is AS or even those that are SS. I would kind of differ from that a little, because I would term that to be somehow discriminatory.
Okay.
Yes, bringing issues of stigmatization, which is an issue in sickle cell disease.
Yeah, okay.
For me, once someone is AA, I think there is no issue of whom you can marry. The genotype issue shouldn't come into place, because once one of the parents is AA, then there is no way sickle cell disease can come into that family.
Okay.
Irrespective of who you marry, whether you marry an AS person or an SS person, as long as you are AA, there is no way sickle cell disease can come. So there shouldn't be issues of be careful. Now, the issue of being careful comes in when you carry the sickle cell gene. Okay. When you have an S in you. Now, that's when I still would not say marry or do not marry. What I would advise in that case is for you to make an informed decision. That is basically, because I think people should have the right to be able to make their own decision based on available information, and not being instructed or being cajoled by other people to make decisions that suit those that are making those advices. If we put myself in that situation, it means I wouldn't be able to get married, because I was born with SS.
No, but at least you are aware. You are aware. And then if you want to make decision, then you make decision based on what you know.
What I'm saying is, if people that are AA are told to be careful not to marry people that are SS, then it means I wouldn't be able to get married. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. That is the discrimination part
of it. Yeah.
So that is that. Then explain crisis in sickle cell disease. Well, crisis is a word, although conventionally it is being taken out of the literature now.
Okay.
That is used to describe what we call in medical terms vaso-occlusive crisis in sickle cell disease, which is, in layman's terms, a painful episode.
Yes.
Now, what happens is that once there is a short of blood supply to any part of your body, that part of your body begins to experience pain.
Okay.
So, sickle cell red blood cells, what the problem is that they get sickle shaped, like a sickle that is used to harvest crop, like a crescent shape. Yeah. So, when they are exposed to certain conditions, like probably stressful conditions, extremes of temperature, even emotional stress can lead to infections. So those cause the red blood cells to become sickle shaped. Okay. And when they become sickle shaped, they become rigid. The red blood cells normally is supposed to be flexible, because there are certain blood vessels in the body that are smaller than the red blood cells, but the red blood cells can still navigate through because of its flexibility. Wow. But when a red blood cells become sickle shaped and rigid, it loses that flexibility. So it cannot be able to navigate through certain blood cell red vessels that are smaller than it. So it just goes and blocks those small vessels. Now, when this occurs in someone that has sickle cell disease, regions beyond that blockage begin to experience pain. And when this happens in multiple places, you begin to experience pains at those multiple places, which is what we call crisis. And the thing is, these pains are excruciating. Yes. Some studies have only compared it to the pain a woman has in labor.
Yes.
In fact, some studies say it is more painful, because some pregnant women that have sickle cell disease have been interviewed to compare labor pain and sickle cell pain, and most have said the pain of sickle cell is much more than the pain they have during labor.
Wow.
So this is what crisis is in a sickle cell, and when you see someone in crisis,
Yes.
the person just at that time feels like dying.
Yes.
Because the
Yes,
pain
it's
is
true.
unbearable.
Yes.
So that is actually what happens at that time. Then the third question was the notion that sickle cell sufferers do not grow up to 23 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that a collection of myths and beliefs about sickle cell disease, which are basically not true. However, this particular one has an element of truth in it, although not very well. Now, as someone that has sickle cell disease, if you do not have access to adequate and quality care, healthcare services, there is every chance that, in fact, before you're 5 years old, you will die. Sickle cell disease begins to manifest in individuals from when they are about 6 months old, because that's the time when the hemoglobin that a child has when it was in its mother's womb now converts into the adult form of hemoglobin, which is the hemoglobin S. Now, the first manifestations are usually what we call hand and foot swelling in a child, where the child's hands and feet get swollen and very painful.
At 6 months?
From 6 months old, yeah. That's right. When it is. Some people don't manifest till they are 1, some 2, but from 6 months, there has been a change to the adult form of hemoglobin. So from that time, the manifestations begin. Now, certain studies that have been done in several African countries have shown that up to 50 to 90% of children that are born with sickle cell disease actually die before their 5th birthdays. And this is because of lack of access to care, lack of knowledge about the disease, and poverty, which also creates lack of access to care.
Yes.
So, but in Europe and in the US, where there is adequate care, where there is no poverty, and people have knowledge about the disease, children survive up to, like I said before, 40, 50 years that have sickle cell disease. People that have sickle cell disease, some have survived up to 60, 70 years. I know of a lady back home where I stay in Nigeria. We celebrated her 61st birthday last year, and she lives with sickle cell disease.
Awesome. Now, people like that, so is it that there's some kind of medication that they're giving to deal with the crisis when it comes to how did they manage to live that long with that kind of condition?
The expression or the manifestations of the symptoms and signs of sickle cell disease is in a continuum. It varies from mild to moderate to severe, and this depends on various factors, which are a bit too technical.